is that what happens since probably the mid-70s, what has happened is that it's not practice that influences the culture of architecture and the education. It's not practice that influences education. It's really education that influences practice. And so what we do in schools is actually fundamental in terms of asking ourselves what architecture is, since we know it's a multiple, it's a multiplicity, and there is no single answer to that question. In a way, that's what the book was about. There are books where you do them before you're going to do the work as a sort of manifesto. You announce it ahead of time. And the others where you, on the contrary, sort of stand back in a sort of critical manner and try to look at what you're doing in terms of not theory that is going to influence practice, but perhaps praxis that is going to influence theory. And so why this book? It was just maybe as simple as, hey, what am I doing after all, right? And what is it? And very quickly you realize that the book is a personal research, yes, but into the basis of what architecture is. And this basis, you quickly realize, is actually quite different from what the public thinks. And those misconceptions of what is carried around about what architecture is probably has never been so strong as in the last 10 or 15 years, where the iconisms of architecture as a pure perception of images and forms, without necessarily having a content or a concept or even a context, becomes incredibly problematic when the public at large will think that architecture is just those funny shapes. So maybe this book was an attempt to reflect on the idea that, like philosophers will say, that, let's say, our society and culture is about concept, perspect, affect, or in other words, thought, perceptions, and emotions or experience. But back to our current period, all the emphasis has been increasingly on the perception, on the image. Maybe it's also related to the fact that we are all dependent on these things where we see images, and it's an image culture. But we know that the time we live in is not only what there is also other dimensions to what the discipline is. And the discipline is not simply about a knowledge of form, but you've heard me say that before, some of you. It's also a form of knowledge. Let me read you this, and then I'll say what I just am thinking about. Why concept? In the history of our culture, the word architecture is usually associated with buildings of great beauty or magnitude. Architecture is often presented as the mere knowledge of form, yet it could be argued that architecture is first and foremost a form of knowledge, like mathematics, philosophy, or art. One of the most important functions is to generate ideas and concepts about the world we live in. Architecture allows us to apprehend that world, and is equally about asking questions and providing answers to problems of use and social activity. Nevertheless, architecture's inescapable materiality is what makes it different from philosophy, mathematics, or literature. By its very nature, architecture involves the materialization of concepts and ideas.